The Darkangel, Chapter 7. Darkangel's Dreams. Iriel awoke in the dark of a first nightfall, to a sound she'd never heard before. It was not the moaning of the wraiths, nor the shrieking of the gargoyles, though they too soon added their voices to the uproar. It was rather a kind of shouting, a series of painful cries, and then silence again, or rather a silencing of a crying voice. The wraiths continued to wail and moan, and the gargoyles to chatter and scream as they had not done for many day months. Iriel rose from the mat of rushes where she slept, and slipped out into the hall, and then down the many steps into the caverns under the castle. As she descended, the cries began again, nearer. Below her she saw the Dora coming up the bank with a rushlight in one hand. "What is it?" she cried, as she left the last step and her foot touched the sandy shore. Taub came closer to the bank. "It's the vampire, daughter," he said. "What's wrong with him?" insisted Iriel. "Is he in pain?" "Oh, great anguish," the Dora replied, "but not pain. Your tales and stories have given him dreams." "Dreams?" exclaimed Iriel. "But he does not sleep." "True, true," said the Dora. "He sleeps but yearly, on his wedding night, but that is oblivion, devoid of dreams, a dead and dreamless sleep. No, daughter, these are waking dreams." Iriel felt cold and rubbed her arms. "He cries out," she said, "as though afraid. But what is there to fear in dreams?" The Dora sighed and took his rushlight in his other hand. "Nothing for you and me," he said, "for us who live. But he is mostly dead, and he wishes his mind to be dead to all things but what he himself chooses to think." Iriel drew back a bit. "How long will they last?" she asked the other softly. The Dora shrugged. "They will last as long as they last," he replied, ceasing for a while and then returning until they have run their course. The cries redoubled and Iriel shuddered. "Is nothing to be done? He suffers so." "Only sleep can cure these dreams," her companion said, "but he has forsaken sleep." "If this is my doing," said Iriel, "I must go to him." "That you must not," said the Dora, almost sharply. "Perhaps there is something—" "There is nothing you may do, daughter. I might comfort him." "He will kill you first," the Dora said. "He's searching the castle for you now. Did you know it?" Iriel drew back again with a sudden alarm. Not since she had first come to the castle had she feared the Darkangel. Feared to displease him, perhaps, but not for her life. Gradually she had come to almost disregard his casual threats, for his manner now seemed not at all fearsome to her. Indeed, most times he either treated her with a mocking amusement or he ignored her altogether. When he first had brought her to his keep, she had expected death. She had not desired it, but she had been prepared. Now she was not. The wraiths and gargoyles depended on her. The Dora looked to her for company, and the possibility of somehow undoing the vampire now also lay before her. Her life seemed suddenly less inconsequential, and she found she did not at all desire to die. "Come along," the Dora said. "He'll be down here shortly. I shall have to hide you." Iriel stood unmoving. She felt all will and initiative drained from her. The cries were moving closer. "If he calls to me," she said as she realized the truth of it, "I shall go to him." "Nonsense," said the Dora. "You are only a very little under his power." Iriel shook her head. "I shall not want to obey, but I shall have to. I cannot resist. His power has grown on me so." "Then I will stop your ears with wax," said the Dora, coming forward and grasping her hand. "Now come along." Iriel went, hardly realizing at first that she did so. "Where are you taking me?" she said in a moment. "To the treasure room," he answered, pulling her after him. "I had hoped to get you deeper into the cave, but we've no time now. Don't fear, we shall be safe enough in the treasure room, only we must hurry." They splashed across the stream and clambered onto the opposite bank. Iriel could hear the cries of the vampire drawing closer, and was beginning to distinguish some of the words. They were disconnected, they made no sense, but their effect was hypnotic. She wanted to stop, to listen, to stand forever trying to catch their meaning. The Dora pulled her over the ivory door and practically had to drag her through. The door closed behind them, and the sound of the words diminished as they moved out from behind the partition and into the room itself. The noise lessened further. There burned the little fire of driftwood in the middle of the room as before. The Dora led her over to it. She realized dimly that the shouting had now ceased altogether. She sank down beside the fire, feeling suddenly very spent. "I shall go and fetch the wax now," said the Dora. "I shall be gone for a little while. He will begin calling you again very shortly, no doubt. Do not answer. Do not even listen. Hold your ears if you must, and stay in this room." The Dora turned away from her then, and left by the other hidden door. Iriel lay down and laid her head on her arm. She listened to the soft, irregular snapping of the driftwood as it burned. Then she heard the Darkangel again. He was much closer. She knew he must be in the caves. He was calling to her. She shut her ears. Laying on her side with her ear so close to the ground, she could hear his footsteps crunching back and forth in the sand. She knew he was pacing along the far riverbank, searching for her. He called again, but the rock and her hands on her ears muffled and changed the sound, so she could not tell what he said. She heard a splash, as though perhaps one of his feet had slipped part way into the water, and she heard him cry in the same moment and scramble back as if the touch of living water burned. There were no footsteps for a while, and then they tramped off down the bank, irregular now, uneven. He was limping. Iriel uncovered her ears and sat up. She glanced about her. The empty room stood still and unchanging, and all was quiet. She waited, and presently the Dora returned with a lump of beeswax in one hand and a great musty book in the other. He seated himself beside the fire and laid the book to one side. Iriel glanced at it curiously, but did not ask him what it was. He held the beeswax close to the fire to warm it. Iriel watched him bend and work it with his hands. The greyish wax was hard and translucent and smelled sourish sweet. It softened slowly. The vampire's shout rang out so close and clear this time that Iriel jumped. She could tell by the sound of it that he was on the near side of the bank. "He's returned," she said, shaken. She'd not expected him back so soon. The Dora nodded. "He's afraid to go very far into the caves." Iriel looked startled. "Afraid? But he is so strong and sure. I did not think he could be afraid of anything." The Dora shook his head and worked the wax. "Oh, he is a great coward. He is afraid of the dark and of his own dreams. He only comes down here now and again to search for—" "Afraid of the dark?" said Iriel. "But—" The Dora laughed. Yes, I know. He's a creature of darkness, but the witch has not yet taught him to love the dark. But when she takes his dreams from him, he'll no longer fear it. It will be the light. Then that's what he will shun." "The witch?" said Iriel. "You mean the water witch, his mother?" The Dora snorted but said nothing more. For a minute Iriel looked at him curiously. "She's not his mother?" she said at last. "What do you mean?" said Iriel. "The Lorelei are barren," the Dora said, "as are their sons, the Ikari. They have forsaken life. No life can spring from them. What children they call theirs, they must steal at an early age." The vampire began to call again. He was somewhere up the bank by this time, possibly even into the next chamber. Sitting up as she was with her ears uncovered, Iriel could hear him perfectly. "Where are you?" he cried, and the dull echoes repeated the cry. "Answer me!" His voice sounded ugly to her, angry and on edge. Iriel shuddered and tried not to listen. She watched the Dora, the fire, glanced all around the great bare room, anything to keep from hearing him. His voice became suddenly smooth and almost sweet. "Come out," he called, "and I promise not to be angry. You haven't really displeased me, but I must talk to you. Won't you come out?" His words rang true and sincere. Hearing them, Iriel could almost believe. "You know I am very fond of you," the vampire said. His voice sounded so pleasant now. "You've nothing to fear from me. Come out." Iriel had risen to her feet without realizing it. She'd always obeyed him. The compulsion was so strong to do so now. "I won't hurt you," the Icarus said. "He's lying," said the Dora. "He'll kill you." "Listen to me," the Darkangel called. "You shouldn't stay down here in those twisting caves. You'll lose your way. Come out now or I shall be angry." The Dora held her eyes with his and would not let them go. Iriel backed away from him towards the door. "All I want," cried the Icarus, "is for you to promise not to tell me any more of those tales. Then we can be friends again. Agreed? Why won't you answer me?" The Dora stood up, and Iriel moved for the door. "Daughter," he said, "don't go to him." "I can't help it," cried Iriel softly. "I know he's lying, but I can't disobey him." "Try. You're only a very little under his power, child. You can free yourself still if you want to." Iriel moaned in despair. "But I don't want to," she faltered. "I want to go to him. I want to spend all my life in his service. I want to die for him. Once you wanted to kill him, the Dora said. Iriel closed her eyes and whispered, Yes, that was also true. And would you leave the wraiths to their fate of death, the Dora said. Iriel shook her head. No, no. Then you must not let him take you. Listen, cried the vampire, frustration beginning to override the honey in his tone. You needn't fear about the bats and lizards. I won't catch them any more if you don't want. His voice suddenly broke with rage and he shouted, Where are you? You worthless little drudge! Come out now so I can kill you! How dare you resist me? Obey! Iriel was shaking. She could not move. Why? The Darkangel roared. His voice rose and trembled. Why have you done this to me? Telling me tales, sending me dreams, lies. They were all of them lies. Tell me no more of them. He broke off suddenly. The timbre of his voice changed and grew frantic. He was not speaking to her any more. No, go away, he said in a frightened whisper. I don't want to think about you any more. I left you behind a long time past. Why have you come back? Go away. Silence for a moment, and Iriel could hear nothing but the fire snapping and her own uneven breathing. What is it? She breathed. His dreams, said the Dora softly. Don't come near me, shrieked the vampire. Don't look at me. Don't touch me. I am the master here. You must obey me. Obey me. His voice trailed off. Iriel was shaking so hard she could hardly speak. She said, I have done this to him. The Dora shook his head. He has done this to himself. What you have done and will do may be. I want to go to him, said Iriel. Do not, said the Dora. Even now he is treacherous and dangerous. He weeps, said Iriel. The Dora shook his head. I can hear him, she insisted. He has no blood, the Dora said, nor tears. He's baiting you. You are wrong, answered Iriel. I think he truly suffers. That may be, the Dora told her, but he will recover. Iriel listened to the vampire's dry sobbing. He moaned, Leave me, let me be. Why do you haunt me so? I want no more dreams. No dreams, please. Iriel put her hands to her ears and sank down. I cannot stand this any more. Stop my ears. The Dora came forward, the beeswax in hand. The wax was hot and soft in her ear. He pressed it into place, then turned her head to reach the other. He pulled off a piece of wax from the lump, but before he could put it in, the Icarus called again from further away than before. She heard limping upstream along the bank. His voice shook a little, but that was all. He was trying to sound pleasant. Where are you? He cried. Come out. There's no need to be afraid. Iriel let the Dora press the warm wax into her ears, and then all was quiet. How long she might have dozed, Iriel could not tell. When she awoke, the Dora was taking the wax from her ears. The great book lay open on the sand across from her. Its pages were covered with many rows of runes and the illuminated picture of a great snowy heron. The small white fire flickered as before. It never seemed to burn down, and she'd never seen the Dora add kindling to it. When his careful stubby fingers had gotten most of the warm wax from her ears, she could hear it snapping quietly now and again. Is it safe? She said, sitting up and taking the last bits of beeswax from her ears herself. Her mind was clear now, no longer under the Darkangel's spell. She felt stronger and more sure. Safe enough for the moment, I should think, the Dora replied. He's gone off upstream into the higher caves. I've closed a few passages and opened others to confuse him. I think he'll be lost up there for a while yet. Are you hungry? Here, eat this. He produced from one of his many hidden pockets a large white mushroom, one of the many that grew in the caves. Iriel took it gladly. It was as fluffy as angel food, but at the same time very filling. The Dora went back over to the fire and knelt beside his book. Iriel gazed at the illuminated pictures of the heron while she ate, and she wondered what it signified. I have done some reading while you slept, said the Dora, and have made something for you. Come, and I will show you. He rose and walked past her, then to the door behind the partition. Iriel followed hesitantly, half expecting the vampire to stand concealed just beyond the corner, ready to snatch them the moment they emerged. But no vampire lurked. As they came through the door and walked down to the water, Iriel saw moored to a stake driven in the sand a tiny skiff, shallow as a marsh boat, made of something pearly and translucent like a horn or shell with a heron's bust, head dipped, wings outspread, carved as a figurehead upon its prow. The craft had a single tiny sail. so light that even the slight cave wind swelled it so the craft bucked and danced in the water like an eager horse. "She's so beautiful," said Iriel, drawing towards the vessel like a moth to light. She knelt and laid her hand upon its slender prow. The skiff bobbed and rubbed her hand exactly like a pony. "What's her name?" "I've christened her Wind," said the Durra. "Wind on the water, in the hope she'll bear you as swiftly as her name." "Bear me?" said Iriel. "I am not going." "But you must, child, don't you see? The Icarus will kill you if you stay." Ariel shook her head and stroked the little ship sadly. "I cannot leave here. I'm in his power, yes, but I've sworn to rescue the wraiths." "He will not let you," said the Durra. "Believe me, your only hope to save them lies in going now and doing as I say." Iriel looked at him a long moment. Half her heart went out to this little vessel and yearned to go skipping away across the water, but the other half still longed after the Darkangel and wished never to leave him. "You're not just sending me to safety, then?" The Durra shook his head. "No safety lies in this departure, Iriel." "You have a task for me to perform?" This time he nodded. "You must sail down river through all the caves and under the plains till you come to the gorge where the river emerges. This will put you miles from the castle and far from the eyes of the gargoyles. Oh yes, daughter, well fed no less, they'd bite the hand that's fed them. Raise the alarm if you left in their sight. When you come to the gorge, you must leave the boat and traverse the plains and the sanded desert." He paused for a moment, took a breath in order to collect himself, and his words were hurried. Iriel listened. "It will be a long trek," he told her. "I know not how long it will take you. Many months and many to return. You must walk towards Oceanus. Walk over the dunes until the planet hangs directly above you in the heavens, and you stand at the centre of the world. There you must seek after the Star Horse, he of the strong hoof, undying. Bring back what you may of him, for it's by the hoof of the Star Horse that the Icarus will fall. Come now, say me the riddle again, that I may know that you have it fast in your mind." Iriel recited the rhyme to him, and indeed it was as clear in her memory as if she'd known it since childhood. "On Averic's white plain, where the Icarus now wings, to the steeps of terrain from the tour of the kings, and damsels twice seven his brides have all become, a far cry from heaven and a long road from home. Then strong hoof of the Star Horse must hallow him unguessed. If adamant's edge is to plunder his breast, then only may the war horse and the warrior arise to rally the war hosts and thunder the skies." The little man folded his arms and nodded as he listened. "Well enough then. Good, child. Do not forget it." He unfolded his arms. "Now, as I told you, I do not know how long this journey will take you. I shall try to delay the vampire, and I shall send you a helpmate if I can." He started. "Oh, I almost forgot." He reached into one of his many hidden pockets and pulled out a sack of black velvet drawn together at the top with a drawstring. He handed it to her. "I have put ample provisions in there for your journey," he said. Iriel gazed at the bag in bewilderment. It lay light and limp in her hand. "But it's empty," she said. The Durra smiled. "Not so. Pull it open and look inside." Iriel did so. The interior was black and filled with nothing. "Now close your eyes and reach inside," the Durra instructed. Iriel obeyed. She felt something smooth and round, the size of a fist. She pulled it out. It was a pale golden fruit. "Reach in again," the Durra told her. This time Iriel pulled out an oyster still damp and cold in its shell. Bidden by the Durra, she reached in once more and pulled out a handful of almonds. Again, a steamed crayfish wrapped in rushes. Again, a bunch of white grapes. She looked at the Durra, and he smiled modestly, brushing a trace. "Oh yes, my dear, I'm a bit of a magician. One can't help but learn a thing or two in—" A shout interrupted him, and then a crash far upstream several chambers away. It sounded as though some heavy door had been thrown aside. Iriel gasped, and the Durra paled. "By the Pendulon," he murmured. "He's found the way out already. I'm not half the magician I thought I was. Quick, girl, into the boat." Iriel had no time to think, or even time to say a word. The Durra was hurrying her into the little craft, which for all its lightness hardly dipped when she stepped in it, and settled herself on the cross plank behind the mast. She replaced the golden melon and other foodstuffs in the black velvet sack, and slipped it onto her sash. Meanwhile, Durra freed the mooring from the stake, and the skiff leapt away from the shore. like a steed given its head. He scarcely had time to toss in the cord before she was out of reach. Iriel turned and would have called some farewell, save the Dora put his finger to his lips and gestured back upstream towards where the vampire must be, though they heard no more noise. Iriel had just raised her hand to wave, when Wind on Water sped through the archway into the next chamber, and the little man on the shore was lost to sight. Iriel sat motionless, gazing astern. She felt suddenly abandoned, alone. After a moment she sighed and dropped her hand, and then she turned and looked to see where the river led.